If you're watching this video right now, you're probably a car enthusiast, which means you probably enjoy going fast. That also means you're probably used to waiting. Toyota took more than 20 years to release an all-new Supra here in the United States. We didn't get our own version of the Honda Civic Type R until a few years ago. And then there's Acura. They made us wait more than 10 years for an all-new NSX. And if you're a fan of the 2007 to 2008 TL Type S, you had to watch your calendar even longer. Acura didn't release its successor, the TLX Type S, until 2021. Like its TL predecessor, the TLX Type S had a V6, but this time around it was turbocharged and combined with super handling all-wheel drive and a beefed-up 10-speed automatic. The chassis was significantly stiffer thanks to additional structural enhancements. The suspension was equipped with stiffer front springs and larger stabilizer bars, which contributed to its higher roll stiffness. All of those improvements were combined with more capable adaptive dampers at both ends of the car. Like you, I've had to be patient. I drove the 2021 TLX and I fell in love with its energetic styling, its pleasant interior, and its blend of comfort and athleticism. I've been waiting more than 3 years to drive the Type S. Was it worth the wait? Stay tuned and you'll see. Three years after the all-new TLX hit the market, Acura updated the entire lineup. All 2024 TLXs benefited from a restyled front end. Liquid carbon metallic and urban gray pearl, like the color of my test car here, joined the palette of available colors. Inside, a 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, a 20% larger 12.3-inch center screen, wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, Amazon Alexa built-in, and a rear seatbelt reminder system became standard equipment. The TLX Type S goes into 2025 with those improvements and a starting price of $57,750. My test car has the optional $600 urban gray pearl paint and the $3,485 copper-colored wheels with Pirelli summer tires, which bumped the as-tested price up to $63,030. The Acura Watch suite of safety and driver assistance features gained a new front sensor camera as well as a new grille-mounted millimeter wave radar, both of which offered increased coverage. The radar warning range for the blind spot information system also increased. The 2024 Type S received new grille mesh, Berlina black 20-inch wheels, a surround view camera, and a 10.5-inch head-up display. Acura didn't increase the power under the hood, but it did sharpen the throttle response of the Sport Plus drive mode. My TLX Type S press car has a lot of the visual add-ons you'd expect to see on a high-performance model. Up front there's this black splitter, above that are these large air intakes, and in between the jewel eye LED headlights is that restyled grille mesh and of course a Type S badge. You'll see more of those on the front fenders and the trunk lid. Now I want to talk about this color for a second. Usually gray can be very ho-hum, but this urban gray pearl really stands out for a couple of reasons in particular. The first is that it appears to have a gold flake in it, so when you see the finish from certain angles, it really pops in the sunlight. Then there's these 20-inch copper wheels. At the same time, they both complement and contrast with the finish. Down the sides, Acura kept things pretty conservative with these largely black mirror caps and this blacked out trim. Like I said before, the TLX Type S has a lot of the visual add-ons you'd expect to see on a high-performance model. So back here you have one of the standards, a rear spoiler, as well as a Type S badge. Further down there's a rear diffuser, and you fans of the TL Type S might appreciate these 4 slash-cut exhaust pipes. My family is in the process of moving into our new house, and since I had the Type S this weekend, I thought, well, I'll use it to move some of the stuff. One of those things was a vacuum cleaner. So I opened the trunk, and initially I thought I would lay it across and fit it in the widest part of the trunk. Unfortunately, it didn't fit there. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll pull on these T-handles and lower the rear seats and then fit it in lengthwise. Unfortunately, there's this rear brace behind the rear seats. So yes, it does stiffen the car and add to its performance, but it posed an obstacle for the vacuum cleaner and I wasn't able to fit it in that way. So what I did was, since the seats were already lowered, I just laid the vacuum cleaner across the backs of the rear seats. Acura went big with the TLX Type S's engine. Instead of the regular TLX's Turbo 4, this has a 3-liter V6 coupled with a twin-scroll turbo that helps it generate 355 horsepower and 354 pound-feet of torque. The sticker for my test car here says I should be able to get 19 miles per gallon in the city, 25 on the highway, and 21 combined. Despite some heavy-footed driving, I've actually managed to average 22. The Type S has a 10-speed automatic just like the regular TLX, but to prepare it for the extra power it would have to handle, Acura equipped it with a new torque converter, stronger internal gears, improved clutches, and a front-mounted transmission cooler. Not only is the Type S's gearbox stronger, it's also significantly faster at downshifting and upshifting. Acura got creative with the paint color on the outside, but inside, it's red leather and black ultra suede accents for the front seats, which are 16-way power adjustable and heated and ventilated, as well as the rear seats. So around that are aluminum accents in the speaker grills for the 17-speaker Acura ELS 3D Studio audio system. Right in front of me, I have this sporty flat-bottom steering wheel with paddle shifters. Behind that, I have the 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster. And up top, I have the 10.5-inch head-up display. Now, speaking of displays, that brings me to the center screen, which is just that. It's a display. It doesn't function as a touch screen. And you should get that idea just looking at it because it's so far back. I can't even reach it from here. It requires quite a reach just to contact it, but it doesn't matter anyway because it's just a display. To engage the infotainment system, I have to use what Acura calls the true touchpad interface. So if you haven't used that before, it's basically a cross between a mouse pad and a grid system. So I can use this like a mouse pad and go over to a certain part of the screen, and then I press down to engage whatever icon I want to use. Or I can just take a sort of shortcut, and if there's something on a particular part of the screen that I want to use, for instance, navigation, I see that it's in the top left. And so all I do is go to the top left of this touchpad and press down on it. I've gotten used to this system over the years, using it in various Acura vehicles, but ultimately I don't really like it because fundamentally you have to get used to it and how it wants you to use it rather than it adapts to you or makes things easy for you. Also, there's just a fundamental mental and physical disconnect. So yes, the display is high mounted and it's close to my line of sight, close to the road, which is great, you know, because I want to keep my eyes on the road as much as possible. But if I want to use something that is showing up on the screen, there's that physical disconnect of my eyes looking one way and then my hand that's controlling what's on the screen being in a completely different place. Also, no matter how many times I've used this, and even though I've figured it out and know how it wants me to use it, there's always that split-second delay of me figuring out what I want to use and then remembering, oh yeah, okay, so I got to go to the top left. I just don't find it all that intuitive or second nature. There's always that separation and that disconnect. Now, moving on to better parts of the car, right in the middle here, you have the various old-fashioned buttons for the HVAC system. There's nothing wrong with those, and I'm glad Acura stuck with them. Now, one button that I'm a really big fan of sort of has to do with the HVAC system. It's the auto button for the heating and ventilation controls for the front seats. I've been getting a lot of use out of this lately. So basically you put it in auto mode and it, based on the outside temperature, it'll turn on the seat ventilation or the seat heating. It just depends on the weather outside. So I just leave that on and let it do its thing. then right in the middle here, you have this dynamic mode selector dial. So if you want to tailor various settings to your liking, you can use the individual mode, which you access by pressing down on this Acura button right there. Or you can use the dial to access the other settings. So there's comfort, which is as advertised. It's very comfortable, it soaks up bumps in the road, but it still manages to keep its composure. But really that's just a bonus, because the normal setting is a nice blend of comfort and responsiveness. You know what's going on the road, but you're not getting beat up with the worst parts of it. It's just a nice middle of the road setting. Then there's sport, which among other things opens up the active exhaust, so you hear a little bit more of the engine and the exhaust, and obviously makes it a little more athletic. Then there's the all-out Sport Plus setting, and you not only turn to that, but you hold the dial for a second or so to confirm that you want to access the Type S's all-out performance settings. Then below that, you have the push and pull controls for the 10-speed automatic. Now, again, I'm not the biggest fan of this setup. I don't see what's wrong with the traditional shifter. But one thing I do like about this is you can kind of mix and match. So if you have it in a more sedate setting like comfort, but you want to wake up the transmission a little bit, make it a little livelier, you can just press down on this DS button, because it's already in drive, and that'll engage the sports setting. So it makes it a little snappier, but you can keep all the other settings that you like. And then down here you have the various controls for the true touchpad interface. You have this center-mounted volume and tuning controls, so your front passenger can reach them just as easily as you. You've got this wrist pad, wireless charging pad, and of course a pair of cup holders. Here I am in the back of the TLX Type S, and this brings me to one of the unexpected downsides to this car. I drove the 2021 TLX, and I don't remember ever having an issue with the back seat. And typically when I test a vehicle, I of course adjust the driver's seat to my preferences and my height, and then I try to sit behind myself in the second row, meaning I get directly behind the driver's seat to see if I have enough legroom. And I don't recall having an issue with that. Right now, I have enough legroom, but just barely. They have these carve-outs in the backs of the seats, and my knees aren't touching them, but they're almost there. And my foot room leaves a little to be desired as well. But I do fit here. The other night, I took some of my family members out to dinner, and I was very excited. I thought, it's a new car, it's flashy, it's sporty, it's got this cool red interior. This is gonna be great. Nobody was happy being in this car, even me, because everybody around me was so uncomfortable. So my uncle-in-law, he's 6'4", he's also a gentleman. So he sat in the front and he scooted up his seat to make sure that his sister behind him, my mother-in-law, had enough legroom and so forth. Doing that caused his left knee to contact the bolster up front, so he was cramped. He instantly didn't like where he was. My mother-in-law still didn't have enough room. She just didn't feel comfortable herself. Then my wife had an issue in a variety of ways. Getting in was an issue because the roofline is surprisingly low, so you can't just get in this car effortlessly. You kind of have to, bend your neck to one side and then just kind of pour yourself into the car. And that's something that I tried out just a few moments ago to see, okay, well, is getting in and out of this really that bad? Yeah, that was a surprise. So you do have to kind of conform to the car's dimensions to get into it comfortably. And then there's the fact that, there's not a whole ton of legroom here. And my seat as it is now is scooted up from where it used to be earlier in my time with this car. So even with that, I don't have a whole lot of room here. And then there's the fact that the seat backs, they're not quite bolt upright, but they're a little more upright than I expected them to be. And then there's the headroom. So up front here, I have enough headroom. I'm 5'10", so my head is not brushing the headliner. But in the back, it's almost to this curve in the headliner. So I barely fit under here, but anybody who's taller than 5'10" is definitely going to have an issue fitting in the back seat. When Acura was developing the Type S, they wanted to preserve the comfort and usability of the regular TLX. And I gotta say, I think they accomplished that wonderfully. There's really no compromise in terms of drivability and comfort when it comes to the Type S. It's just as pleasant, just as comfortable, just as easy to commute in as a regular TLX. But of course, you get the added horsepower and torque and capabilities that the Type S brings. Another thing that I love about this car is just how balanced it is, even in its most aggressive settings. So I was telling you earlier about the normal and comfort modes, but I want to get a little bit more into Sport and Sport Plus. So I was using Sport a lot this weekend. I took the car out on this test loop that I used to use near my old house, and it's got a lot of elevation changes and some nice straightaways, but also some gentle S-curves to it. It's a great test of a car's handling and acceleration and everything, but it's not too extreme. So I took this car out there, had it in sport mode, and part of sport mode is opening up the active exhaust. So you hear more of this car's raspy mechanical wail. And the harder I drove this car, the more I drove this car, the faster I drove this car, the more I heard it basically telling me, give me more. And I was happy to oblige, but I found myself wanting a little bit more from the car myself. And just a little bit. There were just some little things that were kind of off. You know, I wanted the kick down to come a little sooner when I put my foot down. I wanted the paddle upshifts just to be a little snappier, and the paddles themselves to be just a little bit longer. You know, they're easy to access, but I feel like they're just a tiny bit short. And then the brake pedal, I've always found a tad too stiff, but the more I drove this car out there, the more that was not really an issue. You know, it didn't really bother me after a while. I was just soaking up the experience and the curves and everything. And then there's the Sport Plus mode, which unfortunately I can't engage right now because we're in traffic. But the Sport Plus mode, even though it's the all-out performance setting for this car, there's a sense of balance to that as well. So when you activate that, you get faster upshifts, you get sharper throttle response, and the exhaust is just fully open across the board. But even in that, there's a certain livability to it. Now, of course, you know, the revs are higher, and it, you know, really wants you to rev it up and go. You know, like it's the idle, the transmission is ready to go. So it's not obviously as sedate as normal mode. Sorry about that. Well, really, they should be apologizing. But even in that, there is a certain balance, because there are some cars out there, when you put them in their most aggressive performance setting, they're a little too much. You know, they're very heavy-handed, literally. Like the steering, obviously, you expect it to firm up in a performance drive mode, but some cars, it feels very leaden, you know, like the weight to it is exaggerated. But in this car, yes, of course, it firmed up, it got heavier, but it never felt like I was trying to turn a millstone. You know, it had a sort of natural weight to it. It was understandable, it was logical, but it was also easy to use. And then the suspension. Of course, Sport Plus, it firms the suspension up, you know, to make the car more responsive. But even over rough pavement, it didn't beat me up. You know, there's certain cars where even in their regular sport mode, they're way too firm. It's like it shatters your spine. But this car, nice and comfortable, more capable, more aggressive. You knew it was there, it was more pronounced, but you didn't physically regret it. I certainly didn't. It just made the car even more athletic, more responsive, and overall it just felt exciting, it felt approachable, it felt accessible and natural. When Acura was developing the Type S, they wanted to preserve the comfort and usability of the regular TLX. And I've been driving this car for almost a week, and I gotta say, they nailed it. There's no real sacrifice when it comes to this car in terms of comfort and drivability. You know, it's just as comfortable, just as pleasant, just as easy to commute in as a regular TLX, but being a Type S, you get the benefit of the added horsepower and torque and capabilities. It's a win-win. It's, you know, it's kind of a cliched saying, but it's the best of both worlds. It has what I loved about the TLX, but it gets the Type S treatment on top of that. One thing in particular that I really enjoy about this car is just how balanced it is in various ways. So I was telling you earlier about the comfort and the normal settings, and those are fantastic, but I want to get a little bit more into sport mode and sport plus. So sport mode, I got a lot of use out of this weekend. I took this car on this test route that I used to use near my old house, and it's a lot of elevation changes, gentle S curves, and some nice straightaways as well. It's a great way to find out what a car can do in a setting that's not overly technical or complicated. And that's where I took this car and learned just how balanced and wonderful it is in a lot of ways. So sport mode, one of the characteristics of that is opening up the active exhaust. So the car's more vocal. And I found, like, the more I drove this car, the more I heard the car telling me, give me more. It just wanted to go faster, be driven harder, and I was happy to oblige. But in doing that, I found myself wanting a little more out of the car myself. And just little things here and there, nothing major. So for instance, you know, when I put my foot down, I was hoping the kick down would come a little sooner. Also, I found myself wishing the paddles themselves were just a little bit longer. They're just, you know, if they were, I guess, a few millimeters, centimeters longer, they would be perfect. Now the brake pedal, I found to be a little stiff earlier on in my time with this car, but the harder I drove this car, the longer I drove it, the faster I drove it, the less that was an issue. I didn't mind after a while. It wasn't a big deal. And then there's Sport Plus mode. So that unlocks a lot of benefits. So it's the ultimate performance mode for the Type S, and when you activate it, you get faster upshifts, you get sharper throttle response, you get the fully open exhaust, so it's more vocal, it's the most capable, it's also the most aggressive. But, you know, it's a bit misleading, because yes, it is aggressive in various ways, but at the same time, it's so surprisingly livable. So yes, the RPMs jump up, it wants you to, you know, give it more throttle. So obviously it's not as sedate, you know, in pedestrian suburban settings like normal or comfort, but after a while I got used to that. That wasn't that big a deal. And then, like I was saying, there's a certain balance to this, even in its all-out performance setting. So certain cars, when you put them in like Sport Plus or race or track mode, obviously the steering gets heavier. And some cars, even in their sport modes, the steering is leaden. It's way too heavy and underboosted. You know, the weight to it just seems exaggerated. But in Sport Plus mode, it was perfectly fine. Yes, it was heavier, and it made, you know, the feeling and the engagement more direct, more tactile, but it also didn't feel like I was turning a millstone. It was very livable. And then the suspension. Yes, it was firmer, which made the car more responsive, more athletic, but it didn't beat me up, even when I went over rough pavement. It was just, to me, it was surprising how well dialed in Acura got this car. And ultimately, it was livable, it was pleasant, but it was also very exciting and easy to use, even in its most aggressive drive mode. I was impressed. I think Acura accomplished something with the 2025 TLX Type S. They retained all of the positive characteristics of the TLX, but added significant performance and capabilities that are always exciting without being extreme. You get an attractive, well-equipped commuter car for Monday through Friday, and a fully enjoyable performance vehicle for the weekend. To answer the question I asked at the beginning of this video, the TLX Type S was definitely worth the wait. My name is Derek Shaky, and this has been my review of the 2025 Acura TLX Type S for the Collector Car Network. If you've made it to this part of the video, you're probably really interested in driving the Type S yourself. I recommend you do that and go to your Acura dealer for a test drive. If you've already driven the Type S, feel free to let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Once again, thank you for watching, and stay tuned to Classic Cars TV for more new vehicle reviews.